No More Heroes 2 A Desperate Struggle is the second No More Heroes game, which might sound obvious, but No More Heroes 3 will be the fourth one, well, even fifth one, but no one counts mobile games. Regardless, this is No More Heroes 2, the last No More Heroes game I need to play before being ready for No More Heroes 3 coming later this year. This one being the most critically acclaimed one, so why did I play it now? Well, for a few reasons, of course. I played the first No More Heroes on the Wii a few years ago, and while I had an interest in playing the sequel at the time, I had had my fill with the first game in the series being a bit of a tiring game, and the fact that I couldn't find No More Heroes 2 for a low price back then, so I just kind of forgot about it. Then Travis Strikes Again came out, and since it was a spin off, I just didn't care and played it without playing this one. But then here comes the Switch port at a fairly attractive price of 20 bucks and a good frame rate, and that's really all I need. So here we are. All of this really just to say that I played the Switch version and that it runs at 60 FPS, which is good. Anyways, let's actually start this review with the story. Taking place a few years after the first game, No More Heroes 2 has a very similar plot of Travis, our main character, having to compete to reach the top of the UAA, United Assassin Association, for revenge. And this being the justification for the actions and variety of said actions, as Travis has to fight a wide range of crazy weirdos who kill people. And that's about as much as I'm willing to spoil, since it is a fairly short game, and it does have a big focus on somewhat referential and comical story. And when I say referential, I mean it. There are some deep cuts in this game, both to other video game franchises and cinema. For example, there's an ongoing plot thread that is clearly a reference to the movie Paris, Texas, a 1984 movie that I don't think your average gamer would know, and that's kind of a good thing. The references are there, but they're not overwhelming, that the game becomes that. And it helps again that the game's writing and visuals themselves are creative enough to stand out above the reference, which I think is the downfall with a lot of this type of stories, like let's say Ready Player One, when the references become the most interesting thing about your world and story. The game is also very referential to itself, bringing back characters from the previous game and characters related to events of that game, creating some really nice payoffs. Personally, my only big complaint with the story is that the main villain should have had better character development, even though the game itself seems to be aware of this problem and somewhat joke about it. But regardless, fair enough to say I enjoy Desperate Struggle's story, but I will say that this humor is not for everyone, riding that line of being a bit too dark and also a bit horny. But moving on then to the gameplay, No More Heroes 2 feels faster in every way to its predecessor. The combat just feels smoother and more responsive, which is definitely helped by this port running at 60 FPS, but regardless, animations are faster and the pacing of the game in general is faster. No longer do we have an open world that in the original was really just so you could ride your motorcycle and travel between missions. Given there wasn't much to actually do in the open world, here you still get to have your motorcycle, but you only actually get to control it in a very specific mission. What you get instead of the open world here is a list of locations on the map, separated by three main groups. The main missions, these ones will only have one to select from, and it pushes the story forward. Then we have the shops and upgrade areas. There are three of these. One for just general clothing, only affecting your aesthetics. There is a big variety here, but it's also like a bit unnecessary given the shortness of the game. And to me, it just didn't feel very compelling given the other two places you can spend your money on. Naomi's Lab, where you can buy new katanas, which to be honest feels a bit wasted given there's only two beam katanas you can buy at this place. and the best beam katana just gets given to you regardless as part of the story. So it just feels like this should have been given out to you as the story progresses, as the grand total of katanas in this game is 4, which I think is fine for an 8-hour game, but it feels like a bit of a waste to have a whole store just to sell 2 weapons. And it's hard to know if it's intentional or if this game got cut short. Because a lot of this game is played out for laughs, it's hard to know if something is really meant to be that way or maybe it's a cover for a bigger game that was never made. But I like what is here, so I'm not gonna try and start any conspiracy theories. Then moving on, finally, we have Ryan's Gym, which allows you to upgrade your health and attack power, but not just by spending money, as you actually have to be able to successfully complete the short minigame to actually upgrade. Meaning you really only buy into the possibility of upgrading. This could be a bit annoying, but here it felt properly balanced, even if I spent way too much money on the final strength upgrade, which is also the most expensive one. Finally, we have our last set of locations, and these are the side missions, and this is how you actually make money in this game, as the main story doesn't really give you enough money to fully upgrade yourself or buy any katanas. But the side jobs don't usually play like your regular game, as they are more like retro games. These are for the most part simple puzzles, like lay the pipe, which has you connecting 2 ends of a pipe before the fluid reaches the end of the pipe, or man the meat, which has you cooking burgers in a specific way to please customers. And yes, most of these have very dirty and comical names. But there are 2 side jobs that do play in 3D, or in the 3D world, I guess. These are the Sting So Good, which has you catching scorpions while avoiding getting poisoned, which is okay, I guess. But more importantly are the revenge missions, which have you killing various enemies within a specific amount of time, and I would recommend doing them because while it does mostly only have you fighting regular enemies, which isn't the most engaging bit of the game, and they are short, only lasting a few minutes each, but they do have unique locations to them, some of them being reminiscent of the original game, and I think that's cool. Also, the game is short, so it kinda adds a little bit to it. Now moving on, and speaking about the actual core of the gameplay, I already mentioned this faster than the original, but how does it work? Well, Travis fights on a fairly basic 2-button combo system with a katana attack and a beat attack. You can finish off characters with a katana and slash your enemies and get a roulette spin, which gives you a chance at activating a special attack or special ability. These abilities can vary from a mode that makes you super fast or one that kills every enemy in the room, or my favorite, transforming into a one-hit kill tiger. Then the beat attacks instead allow you to do wrestling moves in the game called death blows, and you will acquire more of these as the game progresses. And to add them to your moveset, you actually have to read a comic book inside your house, which is a nice detail that I think was already there for No More Heroes 1, I don't remember. Supposedly there is also a whole system with high and low attacks, but playing on normal, the highest difficulty you can play on your first playthrough, I didn't notice any difference during actual gameplay, and I did play with the closest to the original Wii version as I could by playing docked and with Joy-Cons. Speaking of the Joy-Cons, No More Hero uses motion controls for certain actions, like doing finishing moves or recharging your katana. I found that the Switch version has you moving a lot more than the original Wii version. Maybe that's just something to do with how the Joy-Cons process your movement, but definitely felt like I actually had to move my arms over just flicking my wrists on the Wii version. Speaking of recharging your katana, this is sort of a staple of this game, primarily because it makes you look like you're playing with yourself, but also because it's what balances the game. As here, your block button is also your lock-on button, meaning if you're locked onto an enemy, you are also blocking his attacks. but blocking spends a lot of katana energy, which diminishes your attack power, which keeps a balance of not just blocking every attack, but instead try and dodge, especially since a perfect dodge will also slow down time, giving you an opening to do a lot of attacks. There is also quite a variety of katanas that do play quite differently from each other, but I'd rather not spoil that, even though the best one is on the cover of the game. Regardless, though, despite the simplicity, there is enough to keep it interesting. And also, something that is helping it a lot, it's how visually overloading it can be, which I'll talk about a bit more in the graphics. But now I want to talk about the other two playable characters. Shinobu, a boss fight from the original game, who, after being defeated by Travis, wanted to learn from him. Here, she has a couple levels in a row, which can be jarring, where you play solely as her and even her unique bosses, but overall her gameplay is just a bit too simple and feels floatier than Travis. And the fact that she also has by far the worst levels because of something that shouldn't even be in these games, which is platforming. It feels so janky and unresponsive, and it is absolutely the most infuriating and annoying part of the game, especially in places where you can just fall down and have you walk all the way back and have to do it again since there is no fall damage. I'm glad there is some variety, but the way she is put in this game overall is jarring. Then our other character is Henry, also a boss from No More Heroes 1, and also Travis' twin brother. Here we only have to really play with him for a single boss fight, and he pretty much plays like Travis, so there isn't much to say about him. Now moving on to the enemies, there's a few types of enemies here. They mostly fit into two categories: regular enemies that can have physical or ranged attacks, having either one or the other, not both, and then the other type being big enemies. There's quite a few of those with various different weapons, but for the most part they all fit into the same category of being somewhat slow and having physical weapons. Overall, these fights are mostly only enjoyable due to the spectacle since they don't tend to gang up on you, and the only real challenge comes from having to manage the ranged attackers since bullets drain your defense rapidly and are hard to avoid. The real star of the show for No More Heroes is really the bosses, which there are quite a few of. That being said, they also follow fairly simple patterns, and some of them can even just be stun blocked into oblivion, but again, their spectacle is usually really cool and their personality adds to it. It's a game that it's helped a lot by style, which I guess leads us to talk about graphics and sound. Actually, I almost forgot to mention you can do a special attack with the minus or select button. This move depends a lot on the weapon you're wielding, and the only thing I have to say about it is why the select button? There are so many buttons on the Switch, most of them going unused, so why put it in the least convenient place? It is beyond me. Anyways, graphically, it looks great. Yeah, it's a Wii game, and you can tell, but it's also cel shaded, and the character's art style is so odd and out there already that it doesn't feel old. It's just incredibly stylized. And yeah, you might be fighting in a parking lot, but the lighting is incredibly moody and the UI is very odd with a tiger and a phallic object dancing and then just the insane amount of blood splashing on the screen. It is very enjoyable, I say at the risk of sounding like a psychopath. It also helps a lot of the levels are very referential, as clearly one of the first levels is straight up a spoof of Resident Evil 4 and it's pretty funny. What also really helps this game is the crazy designs of the bosses. For example, one of the early bosses literally has you fighting him in a fighting game style game. Yes, I wrote that phrase, with two giant robots. Another has you fighting an astronaut looking dude in the middle of crop field with the alien symbols, and it's all just very weird and creative and always keeping you wanting to see what's next. I really like a lot of it, except for this game's Destroy Man fight. That fight sucks, honestly. I left because I wrote a swear word and I didn't want to say it. That's why I left. It isn't that funny. Sound-wise it's great as well. There's a big variety of styles and genres to fit with the also wide variety of styles you'll see in the game, but sound-wise there's definitely a prevalence of a rock and also pop sound, which I guess fits with Travis' character, and it's really good with both a mix of both English tracks and Japanese ones. It's hard not to like, especially if you like that mid-2000s sound from the PS2 games, even though this game did came out in 2010. My one complaint with sound not having to do with the soundtrack itself, but the actual lines that the characters say, is that you hear the same lines of dialogue during combat a lot. For any move you do, there's a set of lines that are said, and it's just too easy to get a situation where you're just hearing Travis or the enemies just repeating the same line over and over again, and it can get really annoying. And it happens just enough that I wish they had fixed it with this new port. That being said, it's still an incredible game and one deserving of its cult following. And so I'm giving No More Heroes 2 A Desperate Struggle an 8 out of 10. There is no game quite like this. Well, except for No More Heroes 1. But yeah, I think if you enjoy hack and slash and you're just looking for something fresh to try, then this is it. In terms of recommendations though, well, I should say that you should probably play the first game first. There are some payoffs here that do hinge on that game, but you wouldn't be having a significantly worse experience if you started with this one, and I do think it is a much more easier game to get into than the first game. So it's up to you and how much playing games in order matters to you. In terms of platform and price, I do recommend the Switch version since it's cheaper and it runs better, but it's also important to say that Wii games can easily be emulated on PC, and this is a game that you could play at 60 with a crazy resolution if you really wanted. So that's something to consider if you have a decent PC and are comfortable using emulators. Regardless of your decision though, I hope that this video helped you make it. And regardless of that, I hope you consider subscribing, liking, and commenting. All the things you can do for free here on YouTube. And regardless of that, I hope you're having a good day and goodbye.